There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see everyone out. We have two speakers today. And so I'm going to do a quick introduction for both of them and then hand things off to them. And then usually we leave a few minutes for questions. Sometimes they come through the chat. A lot of people will talk in here as well. Okay, so to my right is Dr. Megan Hayes. To my immediate right, she's an associate professor in the Department of PM&R, that's Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. She's also Associate Director of Education in the UAB Medicine Office of Wellness. She received a bachelor's from UNC, a master's and a Ph.D. from USF, and I went there as well. She completed internships and fellowships in clinical and rehabilitation psychology. Started at UAB about 6 years ago in 2017, was promoted to her current position in about 2022. She's received the Dean's Excellence Award for Service last year and has been selected to be part of UAB's Leadership Academy class of 2024. Researches several things, including cognitive issues related to a variety of topics, including substance use disorders, heart disease, and overall wellness topics. So she'll be doing part of the presentation today. And then over here is also Katherine Meese. She is a doctor and an assistant professor in the Department of Health Services Administration here at UAB. She's also the Director of Wellness Research in the Office of Wellness and also the Director for the Center for Healthcare Management and Leadership. She has a master's in public health from the University of Texas, got her Ph.D. in health services administration, specifically strategic management. And then she's started here at UAB. Actually, she got that Ph.D. at UAB, I think, in 2020. Is that right? Okay. Okay. She brings several years of experience working not just in academics, but industry from all over the world. I didn't list all those locations, but it's all over the world. And topics especially related to academic healthcare management. Both of our speakers are well-versed in organizational topics, excellent speakers. I've heard them speak before, and they'll be presenting today on culture and community in healthcare. Okay.
Great. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you again so much to you all for having us. We're really excited to be here. I think Brandy McCluskey suggested us to speak today, and I'm really glad. I'm so glad that Katherine was able to join me today because truly she is quite an expert when it comes to the organizational aspects of healthcare. So, and I'm really glad to see such a full room and so many people interested in this topic. Certainly with many of the clientele that I work with, I know that culture is something that can impact our healthcare workers firsthand at the individual level, but we'll also be showing you guys how it can really impact groups and departments and organizations as a whole. So thanks again for having us. So some of the things we'll be talking about today, we're first going to start broad. So we're going to show you guys some research, both from our own institution as well as just kind of nationally about the role of that a positive culture and community can have in the workplace. And that's because we really want you guys to have buy-in. So understanding the evidence base for this, I think, is really important so that we can all have buy-in. I think we know logically that this is important, but for me, it really helps to see numbers and to understand the impact that it has in the research. And then we're kind of moving a little bit to some practical strategies for your department, for yourselves, for the organization. How do you build or rekindle a positive workplace culture and community? And I know your department, from what I have been told, is in a time of change, right? So you're doing a chair search. You've got a lot of new faculty. You've had some turnover. Basically, that could have been about my department in PM&R. We certainly have had a lot of changes. We just went through a chair search. So I think it's actually a great time as you're in the midst of change to think about what your values are as a department and what kind of culture you want to have and brand moving forward. And then finally, I'm going to end us with some strategies at the individual level. So what can you do starting now that really doesn't have to involve any systemic change to help you build good relationships at work, to put your best foot forward with your interpersonal effectiveness skills? Because we know healthcare is a team sport. The morale of the team matters, and you can make a difference at the individual level. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Dr. Meese for a little bit.
All right, so we're going to stare into the pit of doom here for a few minutes. So hang with me, and then we're going to spend the rest of our time together crawling out of it. So don't get discouraged. Please, no one run out of the room screaming. I want to talk a little bit about what we have going on in the broader industry, because you're feeling some of these pressures in your individual environment. But I want to sort of highlight where we are as an industry when we think about our humans that really produce the work of healthcare. At its very core, the entire business model of healthcare is humans working with humans to heal humans. And we have a human challenge right now. I had a different title on the slide, but I was told it wasn't professional, so I changed it. Okay, in 2021, 117,000 physicians left the workforce. That is over 10% of the entire workforce, physician workforce in the United States. 334,000 clinicians of all types left the workforce. 32 to 66% of nurses are intending to leave as a result of the pandemic. Workforce shortages top the list of top concerns of healthcare executives for the first time in 2021. And I'm like, shouldn't it have been there before, right? Like burnout's been an issue for a while, but now it's at the very top of the list, replacing financial challenges. Here's an alarming statistic. For every 6 people looking for a job, there are 10 open jobs. There are more jobs right now in the United States than there are people searching for a job. So I'm seeing job postings and requirements go from master's degree and 10 years required to has pulse, right? Is human. Show up, please. And so the people that support the work that you do have a lot of options for where they can go. People who are thinking about leaving healthcare have a lot of options for where they can go. And so that makes our environment even more challenging. But it also emphasizes that we have to really double down on keeping the people that we have and making those relationships work. Lastly, between 2020 and 2022, 54% of workers who changed jobs in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry did not return to the healthcare industry, meaning there are more people going out than there are coming in. So this is quite an alarming crisis. Maybe that other slide title would have been more appropriate. So with this, you might look at this and say, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do about this, right? These are broad industry level factors. People are willing, I think now, because they have options of where to go, to put up with less junk, we'll say, at work, right? They're less willing to put up with non-value added work. They're less willing to put up with broken and inefficient systems and processes. And they're certainly less willing to put up with toxic relationships with coworkers or leaders. And so we have to really think about, in our locus of control and our span of control, what can we be doing to create a better environment so that we have a good shot at keeping the people that we have? Because different than maybe other eras in the past of healthcare, if we lose somebody, we can't just go quickly get somebody else, okay? This isn't 2008 where everybody will take whatever job they can get. So we have to really be thinking about this. I'm going to present to you a little bit of our research that we've done through data collection here at UAB. And so this is coming from our employee pulse survey data. So if you filled out the survey, thank you very much. I read every single comment. We hear you, we're listening, while I was crying into a bucket of ice cream. And yeah, it was alarming, but I just want you to know that those were seen and internalized. So we looked at the things that are predicting the overall net promoter score, meaning on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend UAB to a friend or colleague? So will people help us in recruiting when we're trying to bring in a new chair or when we're trying to hire for these 10 new faculty positions? How likely are our people to go out and say good things about us? And then we also looked at, do people intend to stay? What are the top things in their work environment that are predicting whether or not they'll stick with us, okay? I expected to find a lot more emphasis on pay, right? So many people, when they start thinking about leaving an organization or they're dissatisfied, it's like, I need more money. I need a raise, right? Those of you in leadership have heard it. Inflation is terrible. We need a raise. We need more money. But what we see, in fact, is that the things that are explaining that variation in net promoter score and turnover intention are largely durable work-related factors. And it involves leadership elements and job design elements. I want to feel that the organization supports me and values my extra efforts and contributions. I want to know that I can trust senior leadership to take care of me, to do the right things that they need to do so that I can work in a great organization. I want the resources I need to do a good job, right? It's morally distressing when healthcare workers want to do a good job and they don't have the tools they need to do it. I want to be satisfied at work. I want to be recognized for what I bring to this team or to this environment. I want to feel a sense of belonging and I want to trust my supervisor. On intention to stay, we see some similar things. And finally, pay pops up on the list at number 7. What this data tells me are a few things. One, there are elements here that you as a colleague have a direct influence on, right? This is not only a senior leader problem. It's not only a people up here at UAB problem. That needs to be addressed, right? Those big organizational level things have to be addressed and tended to and managed. But there are also elements here that you as a colleague, you as a preceptor, you as an attending have a direct role in shaping, right? That sense of belonging, whether or not people feel recognized. That doesn't have to only come from the boss. We can have peer-to-peer recognition. And so I want you to keep some of these things in mind as we get into the presentation. If you are in a leadership role and you're hearing it's money, 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 Sometimes what people are saying, and yes, money is important. Salary needs to be taken off the table. It needs to be adequate. It needs to support people, and it needs to be competitive, right? Or they're going to go somewhere else and get more money. But what people are also saying sometimes is pay me what I'm worth. And what I'm worth can be shown in more ways than just financial. I need to feel recognized. I need to feel valued. And also, you don't pay me enough to put up with this other BS. All right, so culture really matters. I can't emphasize this enough. There's a large study that was published in MIT's Sloan Review that looked at 1.4 million Glassdoor reviews, which is an online platform for reviewing different organizations. And so they looked at how people described their organization and then whether or not those people actually left, right? So not turnover intention, but whether or not they actually walked out the door. And what they found is that relative to compensation, toxic corporate culture was 10.4 times more likely to result in exodus from the organization than compensation itself, right? So again, people say it's the money. It might be, you can't pay me enough to put up with all this stuff. Toxic corporate culture is a responsibility of leaders, managers, supervisors, but also colleagues, right? I can have the best boss in the world, but if my colleagues are out to get me, then I'm not going to feel like I'm in a good culture. You'll also notice that failure to recognize employee performance is 3 times more likely to result in turnover than compensation. Unfortunately, when we looked in our own data, we saw that people are having a very different lived experience, right? People don't feel valued as human. They feel like they're being asked to do more and more with less, or that money is a bigger value than taking care of the people that are responsible for billing, right? That are generating the work of patient care. My favorite description from our data was squeezing more juice out of an already macerated fruit. It was like a really elegant way to say beaten to a pulp, okay? We also saw that many people, roughly 16 to 30%, felt that they had a toxic work environment, that was a major stressor for them. Roughly 25% of people did not feel respected at work. Respect is a bare minimum. And very few people were satisfied with their recognition at work. So we've got some work to do here in terms of creating the environment that we want to work in and that our colleagues want to work in.
High level of innovation, is that too much innovation or not enough innovation?
Yeah, great question. It's too much innovation. And so if you think about the context, this was across industries, but if you think about the context of an academic medical center, right? We're always fixing, we're always changing, we're in a PDSA cycle, you're on a chair search, we're hiring more people, we're going to optimize this process. I think that very much fits the work that we do here. So that also puts people at risk because you get change fatigue, right? You're tired. Like sometimes you just want to do the process and have more than a month to do it before it changes. So very good question. Thank you.
And I'll also add to that change fatigue that we've got to keep in mind that people are very tired, right? I think since the collective trauma that everyone went through during the peaks of COVID, everyone was, doing the best that they could, but cortisol levels were probably running high across all of us. I can speak for myself. So I think we're also in a period of recovery from that as well. And a lot of change during a period of recovery can be especially challenging when you feel like your resources are dwindling. So kind of getting back, so before we can get to what makes a work culture more positive and the workplace community more positive, we want to talk about what we don't want to see. And actually, these 5 factors that I'm about to show you are also from that MIT Sloan review that Dr. Meese was just pulling some data from, also from that very large scale study from MIT Sloan. So the factors that emerged were, number 1, a disrespectful environment, right? Respect is truly the bare minimum. So all of these factors, these are factors that if they existed and the person endorsed that in their workplace culture, they were much more likely to say that their workplace culture was a quote unquote toxic one. So they were identifying with a toxic culture. And these 5 factors that I'm going to show you are more higher level factors. There was a lot kind of underneath each of these factors as well that they kind of smushed into these top 5. But they were kind of the 5 things that came up again and again. So a culture of disrespect towards others. This could include just kind of being rude to people, making people feel like they're not heard, that their opinions are not, that they don't matter, that type of thing. A non-inclusive environment, right? So any discrimination whatsoever that was perceived by the person, they're much more likely to say that there was a toxic work culture. It also doesn't have to be about any one characteristic about a person, like race, ethnicity, LGBTQ status, but it could also be just feeling like there's an in crowd and there's kind of cliques in the workplace and that you're not a part of that. Unethical workplace environment, that kind of speaks for itself, but this can create like moral distress in the workplace. We saw a lot of that during the peak of COVID, where people were feeling like they were put in difficult positions because we didn't know a lot about the virus at first. Cutthroat environment. So what Dr. Meese was talking about earlier, collaboration versus more of a competitive environment, but kind of like colleagues throwing each other under the bus and that type of thing. And of course, abusive, but abusive in the sense this can be very nuanced. So verbal abuse can look more obvious when someone is saying like curse words at you or that type of thing. But it can also be more subtle, right? More of a passive aggressive long game that can feel abusive to an employee as well. So those are things we don't want to do. And those probably seem very obvious to you all. Another thing that I want to point out is some of the research on burnout very quick. This is not a burnout talk. I'm sure you have heard many of those, but I do want to go over some of the factors that contribute to burnout to hone in just how important that workplace community and culture is. So this research comes from Christina Maslach. She's a psychologist. She actually came up with the term for burnout decades ago. Burnout is nothing new, but again and again, we see in literature, and that's been reflected in our own pulse survey data, the same type of factors, these 6 factors that come up that we know contribute to things like burnout, compassion fatigue, and turnover, essentially, right? So we know workload. We all think of that. There's too much to do, not enough people or resources to do it. Control over one's work, autonomy, right? So are you being told what to do, or do you have some choices, right? And I think this is particularly difficult for trainees. They don't always have the autonomy that attendings would have, right? They're kind of having to do these rotations and what they're being told to do. Also often true for staff, right? So physicians are going to have a lot more autonomy generally than nurses might. Reward/recognition. We're going to really be honing in on this in this presentation, so I won't spend too much time there. Fairness, right? Fairness is extremely important, and that can be part of a culture, right? A negative culture. Are people getting promoted when meanwhile you're kind of doing the same type of work and you're not being looked at for promotion? Are other people getting recognition for work that you're doing and you're not being seen, right? So these things are really important, or just simple thank you for helping me out with that task, or thank you for all the good work that you're doing, coming in every single day and staying with us through this time of change. Values, right? Does a person's values differ, their core values, what's the most important things to them? Do they seemingly mismatch with that of the department, their division, the organization as a whole? Are people seeing things that are at a disconnect with their own personal value system? Maybe they really value integrity, but they're seeing things at work that don't seem to fit with that value, that it doesn't seem like other people kind of see things the same way they do. And that will wear on a person and contribute to burnout. But kind of brings me to this final factor, and definitely last but not least, but I wanted to highlight it, and that's community, right? While culture is all in these factors, right? We can't separate the culture from all of these things. We know that in Christina Maslach's data, and for decades of research, we have seen culture and community come up time and time again. So a person who has a workplace community that they rate as more toxic, that is not supportive, that they don't have psychological safety, they are much more likely to have burnout. They are much more likely to leave their organization and their job. So just keeping in mind that from decades old research, we know how important this is. And finally, one more thing to just hit home on the importance of community culture in the workplace. This is actually a diagram, a graphic that I really like, that is from the U.S. Surgeon General's framework for workplace mental health and well-being. This came out in 2022. I love this document. It is my best friend. I look at it all the time, honestly. He also came out with an advisory for burnout and healthcare workers. That's a good read if you're interested in this topic. But this kind of summarizes these 5 principles that the Surgeon General's office, based on data, years, decades worth of data, of what is most important for workplace health and well-being. And you can see that there's an entire section devoted to connection and community, right? Social support, belonging, these types of things. And that's what we're here to really hit home with you all today. But all of these other things matter. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Meese for getting into some of the actual strategies that are evidence-based.
All right, so now that we've stared into the pit of doom, we're all on board, hopefully, that these things matter and they're important. We're going to talk about what we can do, right? And some of these are strategies that are most important for our leaders to be doing. Some of these are strategies that anybody can do. And, even if you don't hold a leadership title, you still have influence, right? Are you working on a team where, trainees are looking up to you for guidance and support? Are you working on horizontal teams where you're an informal leader, right? So just because you don't have a leadership title doesn't mean this doesn't apply to you. Okay, so we talked a lot about the importance of belonging. We saw it on some of those predictors of Net Promoter Score and turnover intention. And so what does that look like? What do we do? So there are a few elements that can lead to creating an environment where people have the best opportunity to belong. Okay, the first is competencies. So people have to have the skills to be able to belong. Everybody's like interacted with that weird person that doesn't know how to talk to somebody, right? That person may need some training or skill development in how to connect with others, how to have a conversation. If you haven't had a chat with that person, you might be that person, right? But everybody needs some training and development sometimes to understand what are those competencies for connection. This is a really great opportunity for preceptors or attendings to be able to coach and mentor their trainees on areas that they might see that could improve to be able to foster their opportunity for connection, right? That feedback might be something as simple as, are you open to feedback about that meeting? When you said this in this manner, I could see people's body language responding like they felt like it was a little bit too direct. So that might be something to be paying attention to, right? We can coach and encourage the people that are within our sphere. Then there are opportunities to belong. This is the availability of time and space for people to connect, right? Some of this gets really challenging with workload. So having a sustainable pace of work is an element of opportunities to belong, right? If I don't have time to pee at work because my workload is so heavy and I'm expected to see a patient every this many minutes, then it's very hard for me to ask about your kid's soccer game, right? Or to remember things about you. And so not only thinking about creating connection mechanisms and opportunities for people to connect, but being mindful also of the workload. A quick note here, sometimes the temptation to create opportunities to belong or to connect as a team is to do a bunch of outside of work events, right? Like we're going to have a team building exercise, 1999, and we're going to give you a t-shirt, or we're going to do drinks after work, or we're going to do, this and that. For some people, that will feel like a resource. And for some people, that will feel like a demand, right? Sometimes inadvertently, that can create in-groups and out-groups where you might have some people that are wanting to go to things like that. And you have other people that have to pay $200 for a babysitter to show up, and they're not going to be there because they have other responsibilities. So be mindful that those things aren't only happening outside of work. It could be even something as simple as putting a dartboard up, right? And having a little friendly competition, or asking people on your hallway to go to lunch. It doesn't have to be these big organized events. Some people have a stronger or less strong motivation to belong. Like my husband needs 2 friends in his life and he's good. He's like an air plant. He just needs little spritz every now and then, right? I'm like a hydrangea. I need soil, I need water, I need sunshine. And so everybody's a little bit different in this regard. And then even if all these conditions are in place, people still might have the perception that they don't belong. Some of that could be influenced by past experiences, or some of that might be a feeling that I'm not in the in group, right? Or I just don't feel like there are other people here like me. So we also know that trust building is really important, right? We saw in those results at the beginning that trust, not only in senior leadership, but also in supervisors, is important. But trust between colleagues also really matters. And so the first most obvious thing is to become a trustworthy person, right? And so here are some elements of building trust that we can be thinking about. And so I want you, as you're listening to this, to be sort of thinking through, are there any behaviors, are there any things I'm doing that might be pressing on one of these elements of trust that maybe I need to make a correction, or maybe I need to make a change? I am guilty of doing every single one of these things poorly, just FYI. So I am, the blind leading the blind here. The first one is competence and consistency, right? Am I building the skills I need to do a good job so that people can trust when I say I'm going to get this thing done, that it's going to be done well? Am I putting appropriate boundaries in place and making sure that I'm balancing my plate so that I'm not saying yes to too much and I'm able to deliver consistently, right? So some of this is managing what we say yes to. Honesty. Am I being transparent, straightforward? This is particularly challenging, I think, for mid-level leaders or leaders who sometimes will get a request and the real answer might be a bad one, right? The honest answer might be a bad one. And so we kind of like make up stories, like, oh, it's probably this, or we skirt around the issue. And over time that can diminish trust. I found that generally when people understand all of the constraints and challenges of a decision, they tend to arrive at the same logical conclusion, right? So we need to give them that benefit by explaining. Owning our mistakes, right? I don't know a single person that didn't act a fool or screw up in some way during COVID that might need an apology, right? We were all stressed. Our brains were not optimized for good relating and decision-making. And so if you make a mistake, instead of trying to save face, to skirt around it, to try to throw the blame on somebody else, just owning that and apologizing. Building relationships with each other. I can't trust somebody I don't know, right? The Edelman Trust Barometer, which has been measuring trust for decades, has found that starting in 2022, the dominant emotion in the United States is distrust, meaning I get on the elevator and I immediately don't trust you, right? That's new. And so we have some strong headwinds here, but making sure that we're in relationship and building those relationships helps. Setting expectations of behavior. If I don't tell you what I expect of you, and I think this is particularly relevant for trainees, for residents and fellows, if I don't tell you and I'm not clear about what I expect of you, how can I blame you when you violate my expectations, right? And yet, if I haven't clarified those expectations, somebody violates my expectation, it might damage trust, right? I expected you to do this, you didn't do it, now I don't trust you. I don't trust your competence, I don't trust your word. We have to make sure that we're doing the good work of setting those expectations so that people know how to navigate towards it. Creating a safe environment, okay? This includes psychological safety, which is very relevant to your environment. Do people feel safe to speak up and to raise their voice, or do they feel like they'll get shot down and there's retaliation? I gotta be honest with you, I think in an academic environment, we don't do this super well. Coming from industry, I will sit in a meeting in academia and go, oh my gosh, can you believe this? Like, get out the popcorn, this is brutal. Because part of the work, particularly in a research institution, is you put your work out there, right? You submit to a peer-reviewed journal or you submit it to a conference. And there's like a whole process where people are like telling you how it's stupid and wrong, right? And that's how we get better. But sometimes we take that mindset into our interactions with individuals, right? Not everything is a peer review, okay? So we have to create a safe environment for people to experiment, for them to raise, half-formed ideas, or for them to say, hey, this isn't working for me, or I'm concerned, or I'm struggling. Some of the phrases that kill this, right, are things like, that'll never work, right? We've tried that before and it didn't work. That's not how we do it here. We've always done it this way. I'm sure you've all heard these things, but that can start to make people feel like I'm not going to raise my voice here because everybody's going to ignore it. And then lastly, showing other people that we trust them, right? If you automatically don't trust me, I'm going to think there's something going on with you, right? I'm not going to trust you. It's a whole downward spiral. And so can we choose to set our default emotion of others as trust? If a violation of trust has happened, we have to start to normalize the process of forgiveness, apologizing and forgiveness in the workplace. Sometimes we are so fearful of looking like we don't know what we're doing or not being right or wondering if there's going to be some huge consequence that we avoid apologizing and asking for forgiveness, but we have to do it. If we just move on and hope nobody noticed and they'll forget, it's unhelpful, right? We saw this over and over and over in our survey data. I just want someone in leadership to apologize. We understand that this, rollout didn't go well. We understand that this project failed, but nobody apologized. They're just moving on and hoping that I forget. And then down the trust spiral goes. So forgiveness has a lot of benefits, both to the forgiver and the forgivee. Physical and mental health of the forgiver and the forgiven, restored sense of humanity, which we need a lot in healthcare right now, and a number of organizational performance results. The picture on the right-hand side is a picture that I took in Rwanda in 2007. It was 13 years after the genocide, where nearly 1 million people died in the span of in the span of 3 months, 100 days. And these two women were working in a coffee cooperative, and the president explained to me that they were both functionally widows for different reasons, opposite reasons. One because her husband was killed in the genocide, and the other because her husband participated in the killings and was in prison. And every day they sat together and shared a snack because they knew that if they didn't work together to survive, they weren't going to be okay. They had to restore and reconnect. And so if they can do it, none of us have an excuse, okay? If they can do it, we can do it. And so I want you to be thinking about, is there anything, a colleague, a boss, a leader, a friend, that you might have room to apologize for? And it could be something as simple as, hey, when I called you out in that meeting, I now see that could have created a perception that I was devaluing your input. I'm so sorry. Will you forgive me? Here's what I'm going to do next time, right? We have to get used to saying it. In terms of promoting psychological safety, I want you to think about two things, that we're going to be Spartans and not super chickens, okay? Some very interesting research done by David Muir out of Purdue looking at chicken productivity. It's very easy to do because you just count the eggs. And so he wanted to know if we create a normal flock of chickens and we create a super flock of chickens, all the highest producing chickens put together, and we follow them over time, what happens? And what he found is that in the control group of normal chickens, egg laying rose a little bit over 6 generations. It went up slightly, okay? He saw that in the group of super chickens, what do you think happened? Productivity went up or down? Show me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Down. That's right. The super flock of chickens, productivity went down because there were only 2 chickens left, because they had all but pecked each other to death. Isn't that sometimes what our modern work environment can feel like, right? In some ways, we're so incentivized to these productivity targets and your individual performance and these things you have to do, and there's only room for one of you, and there's only room at the top, and you have to score this to get into this residency, that it can leave us feeling like the only way to survive is to have a chicken fight, right? But then we're left wounded at the end. And so that's not a helpful environment. It doesn't promote psychological safety. It does promote us versus them, me versus you, right? I think about the grant process and even how we talk about promotion and tenure, right? Oh, well, we're not really going to, celebrate that you're on somebody's grant. You have to be the PI. Oh, there's only room for one of you to go after this or that thing. And so sometimes the mechanisms that we've put in place promote this type of environment, but it's not good for collective intelligence, longevity, and productivity. Instead, we need to adopt the attitude of the Spartans. Has anyone seen the movie 300? Yeah, okay. My main takeaway from that movie was that people can have really beautiful abs. I don't know that I really got anything else out of it, but the movie was about Spartans, and they were very successful in battle because they used a phalanx style of warfare where they essentially put their shield end to end and made like a turtle shell, right? And then they would slowly advance against the coming troops. And that protected the entire group. And only when the enemy got close enough would they use their spears to defend themselves. And so the spear was about defending yourself. The shield was about defending the entire group. And so men and women, they would send their sons to battle, would hand them their shields and say, son, with this or on this, meaning you better bring your shield back or you better be dead, okay? Losing one's spear in battle was seen as a disgrace. Losing one's shield in battle was seen as an act of treason because you put the entire group at risk. That is the environment that we have to bring into our teams, right? That we're together, we're unified, and we're going to protect each other. If you imagine a group of people standing, in a circle, facing outward with their spear, back to back, so that every direction a saber-toothed tiger might attack, right? They'll be met with a spear. That's how we're chemically designed, and from an evolutionary perspective, designed to function, where we operate best when the protection of the group is a top priority and when we're focused on protecting those around us, right? And we feel they're doing the same for us. The minute I feel a spear in the back, what happens? Every man for himself, right? I've got to look out for me. I'm going to look out for number one. What's in it for me? What's my benefit to this? When you start to hear those things in the workplace, sometimes it means that there's been a breach of safety, right? I feel attacked. I feel stabbed in the back. There's this cutthroat behavior. I feel like it's either me or them. And so people start to act in self-preservationist ways, and down the spiral goes. And so thinking about how can we be Spartans and not super chickens is really important. We also saw in some of those earlier slides that recognition is really important, right? Recognition and appreciation. People want to feel valued. They want to feel seen as humans. When I say I want to feel valued, okay, there are sort of 2 things in that equation of value. There's money, which is an external sign of value, right? I can measure it. I can see it. Because you work at UAB, I can also see all your money, right? Because it's public knowledge. And then there's appreciation. I want you to think about a seesaw. When one goes down, the other must go up, okay? When I feel unappreciated, I expect more money to compensate me so that I feel valued overall. You might find that there are times in your own career or in people around you where you've been fine with your salary. You're like, it's not amazing, but it's fine. I'm good. And I love what I'm doing and work is good and everything's fine. And in that same salary, at another point, you feel like, gosh, I really don't get paid enough for this, right? And sometimes the difference is I don't feel valued, right? So I need more money to offset that. Some of you may be watching the Kaiser strike. I'm watching it very closely. 75,000 healthcare workers across the country striking. And they're saying they want more money, they want better working conditions, they want better staffing. But on their signs, on the picket line, what you see is respect and value, right? Value, show me that I'm appreciated, show me that I matter. Some of this needs to be done at the organizational level. Some of this needs to be done from leaders, but we can also do this for each other. Okay, so here's some tips. Be a world-class noticer, right? Watch and observe. What are the little things that people are doing that I can appreciate? It might be something as simple as, hey, thanks so much for, supporting my idea in that meeting. I really appreciated it, right? Great job with this patient. I noticed how you did X, okay? Ask people how they want to be recognized. We asked in our pulse survey. To be honest, a lot of people said money. One person said a billboard. I was like, okay, well, there's a billboard. So I guess we did that one. But most people said things like, just say thank you, right? You went into healthcare to help people. You're not looking for a parade every day, but you do want someone to say thank you. See what I'm doing? Just say thank you. 130 people said that. Just say good morning. Good morning. That's free, by the way. And that's something that you as colleagues can do to help people feel seen and that they matter. There was also a huge request for more visibility and presence from leadership. And so if you are in a leadership role, being visible, being present, being in the trenches matters. We don't have to wait for big stuff to recognize, celebrate, or appreciate. Sometimes we think it's like, oh, we can only, appreciate people when they get an RO1, or we can only, celebrate things. Because if we just appreciate people for little stuff, it's like giving everybody a trophy just for showing up at soccer. Like, don't you know that ruined the millennials? We can't do that. Okay. And so sometimes we feel like we have to wait for this big stuff, but honestly, we can just thank people for showing up. Okay. You saw that slide at the beginning that healthcare is not a super desirable environment, right? For a lot of people, there are more people going out than there are coming in. So just showing up is worth celebrating, right? Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here is great. You can say that. I know it's counterintuitive to some of us where it's like, you've got to earn it, right? I'm not going to baby you, but taking time just to appreciate people for who they are. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being a part of this team. Thanks for showing up. As anybody will know who has an open position right now that they're trying to fill, okay? Just because someone accepts the position doesn't mean they show up on the first day. And just because they show up on the first day doesn't mean they're here for their 30-day, 60-day, or 90-day review. And so those daily acts of appreciation really matter. Gallup found that high appreciation cultures are ones in which little things are appreciated frequently, right? So it's not always the Dean's Award. That's great. It's good that we have these bigger visible things. That daily appreciation matters, and it's something that you can do as a colleague. Recognition and innovation go hand in hand. So think about ways that you can build mechanisms in your department for employee voice, right? For people to raise ideas. We asked people if there were any redundant, inefficient, and duplicative processes in the pulse survey, and we got 2,500 suggestions, right? So there's a lot to figure out what to do with. And then in our recent nursing survey for the We Care grant, we asked people, is there any stupid stuff we should get rid of, right? And we got a lot of really good suggestions. And so finding mechanisms where people can raise their voice, help us improve, and then recognizing them for that contribution.
All right, so we've talked about some higher level factors, some of which you have some control over, like recognizing a peer, some of which you're not going to have total control over because, of course, culture change takes some time and it requires the entire group to kind of make some change, right? But these strategies that I'm going to tell you all about right now, these are things you can start today. These are things that you can utilize to help build or improve your relationships at work. We all know that having difficult conversations is a part of work, right? And so a lot of the individual healthcare workers I see as clients, they struggle with communication. We all do, right? It's really hard to figure out how to say something because as we discussed, being honest is important, right? But how do I say that information? What's the best way to do it? So I wanted to arm you all with just some, first of all, why is this interpersonal effectiveness skills important? And then what are some general guidelines for putting yourself in a position where you can communicate something the most effective way possible? So first of all, why is this important? We know that creating and maintaining meaningful relationships in the workplace does require good, transparent, consistent, effective communication. We also know that people who have good communication skills tend to work better in a team, and we know these skills can be taught, right? So that's a really good thing. Other people will enjoy working with you and want to help you when you are an effective communicator. That's a great thing. This is how we change culture at the individual level. It's also an extremely important quality in leaders. Again, transparency, communication, trust, all of these things rely on communication. And one thing I love about interpersonal effectiveness skills is that it shifts the focus from the person's response, or like what you're trying to get and trying to kind of want to control that person, right? And it shifts it instead to what's in your control. And the only thing in your control is how you conduct yourself, right? And how you communicate your request or your concern or your question. Ultimately, you can't control the other person's reaction. That's up to them. And that can be really difficult sometimes. Some general guidelines that I like to share with people, there's 3 acronyms that I'm going to share with you. These are all, I'm a psychologist after all, so here's the psychology portion. These are all from a therapy that I really like, a psychotherapy called dialectical behavioral therapy. It's for people with distress intolerance or people who struggle with distress. I would actually say it's great for healthcare workers because a lot of us are under distress a lot of the time. So if you're stressed out, these tips will work for you as well. So just know these come from this great therapy. The first one is give, and this one is all focused on preserving relationships when you are communicating. So this is more focused on making sure that you're caring for the other person or respecting the other person as you're talking. This will enable you to preserve the relationship, even if it's a challenging conversation. So when you're in these conversations, maybe you're trying to have a difficult conversation with your boss, supervisor, program director, whatever it may be, always remembering to be gentle. So I know from the couples counseling literature that a gentle startup is actually one of the most predictive factors in how well the rest of a conversation goes. Try to remind myself of that with my own husband, right? We don't want to come in too hot to the conversation. And sometimes when we're not being mindful, we might, right? So make sure you're kind of in the right headspace, able to have a gentle startup in that conversation. As the other person is giving their perspective, make sure you listen, act interested, reflect back what they're saying. It's not just me, me, me. The other person in front of you is a person as well with their own values, interests, thoughts about the matter. Make sure you listen to those. Validate. I hear what you are saying. I could see how my behavior might have been difficult for you to take in when I was really stressed out during COVID. I understand where you're coming from. Use an easy manner. Smiling's great, right? We know the term RBF. That can really, a lot of our communication comes through with nonverbals. So you could be saying one thing as gentle as you think you are, but you've got a really flat face, kind of scowling, right? Or maybe your shoulders are up like this and your arms are crossed. So kind of relax, right? Take your shoulders, put them down. I have to remind myself of this in conversations. Kind of make sure that I am having an open posture, that I am, and this takes some self-regulation, right? So this is a practice, and that's why it's a skill to learn. Now, fast. This one is all about respecting yourself in a conversation, okay? I, working with a lot of healthcare workers, and myself included, struggle with people pleasing. It is very hard sometimes to stay focused on the need or request that I have in a conversation because I kind of want to bend and be like, okay, I'll do it your way. It's just easier, right? But no, it's not easier. Ultimately, resentment will build and you will not be happy because your need, want, or request is not stated accurately, and you have zero chance of getting it met because your method of communication is too passive. So this can help guide you to kind of stick to your guns, if you will. So first, be fair. When you're communicating a request to someone, make sure that you're considering both their perspectives as well as your own. You're really trying to stick with the facts. You're really trying to go into that conversation having considered all the pros and cons. No apologies. Don't say you're sorry unless there is something you have truly done wrong, right? So you're not sorry for just having an opinion. You're not sorry for having a request, need, want. You're just a human being with needs, wants, desires, and requests, right? That is perfectly reasonable. But of course, we do want to apologize, and there's a time and place for that if we have done something wrong or we feel badly that we have wronged someone. Stick to values. So if you feel pressured in a conversation to do something that is against your value system, don't sell out. Don't bend. Stick to your most deeply held values, whether that be integrity, relationships, science, creativity. Stick to your values in the conversation. Finally, be truthful, right? Well, the obvious, we don't want to lie, but also being truthful to what your want and need is, right? So if you aren't communicating effectively, what I really want is a promotion in this department, for example, or what I really want is for my salary to be corrected to market value. If you're not saying that clearly, you're not respecting yourself, right? So being sure to stick with the facts and actually state what you want, even if it's scary. So this can take some practice. So finally, we get to the objective kind of way of stating a request. And this is my favorite one. It's called Dear Man. So let's say you've got a request that has been on your mind. There's something you'd like to see change. There's something you really want to ask out of your supervisor, department chair, division director, whatever it might be, program director. This is a good framework for how to have a difficult conversation. It's one of my favorites. And this one's kind of complicated. It takes some practice. But what I suggest is if it's a big conversation, write all the aspects of Dear Man out. Practice it with yourself or someone else, and then go in kind of armed, feeling like you at least have a general framework. It might feel shaky at first, but this is a really good way to know that there's some type of formula for communicating effectively. So the first part, Dear, we describe the situation, right? So I've noticed that someone who was hired 2 years ago, who has the exact same job as me, makes significantly more money than I do in salary. That's just facts, right? I've noticed X. We stick with the facts, no judgment. We just say what's going on with the situation. For the E, we express our feelings about that thing. This is your chance to kind of give your perception, right? It makes me feel undervalued by the department, by the institution, right? How does it make you feel? That's your time to say it. A, this is where we're truthful. Assert yourself. Ask for what you want. I would love for my salary to be corrected by X time. I would love to be promoted to this role that we have discussed for several years by this time, right? You can ask. Again, that's the only thing that's in your control. And remember that clear is kind. And leadership wants their people to stay right now, right? So keep that in mind as well. So then we want to reinforce. You want to share positives of this request as you see them and negatives. How might the person you're asking meeting this request actually benefit from meeting your request? How might the institution benefit? How might the patients benefit? And of course, we can acknowledge the negatives. Like, yeah, I know that money has to come from somewhere, right? We got to figure it out. That might be tough. Let me know how I can help, right? So we can always acknowledge both sides of things. The man part of this, we've got to stay mindful. That means not allowing ourselves to get spun off into some old resentments or other arguments or whatever it may be, another topic, right? Reminding yourself of the goal of the conversation and sticking to one conversation at a time. A, appear confident, effective, right? Sit up straight. You are an adult having an adult conversation. You're not in the wrong for making a request, right? So make eye contact. Just be, if you don't feel confident, we always say fake till you make it, but give it a try, right? And then negotiate. You may not be willing to negotiate. You may have a hard limit about what you're willing to accept on a particular request, but it's always good if you do have that room to negotiate to try to meet the other person where they are too and come to some kind of conclusion that seems to satisfy both parties. So Dear Man, love it. It's a good way to get your request met. And again, it doesn't guarantee your request is going to be met. We cannot guarantee, but all you know is that you have put your best foot forward in effective communication and asking for the thing that you want or need. And sometimes you use Dear Man to say no, okay? Because boundary setting is very important as well. So this may be a time where you're saying under the assert yourself section, unfortunately, I don't have the bandwidth to take that project on at this time. And that's completely fine as well. So getting back to some of these other factors that are important, we don't have too much time left, but we wanted just to spend the last section here honing in on the importance of social support as it relates to a positive culture and community, and also the benefits for you. So we know that humans require social connection. We are social animals. We evolved living in villages and tribes where people all helped each other out. So even the most introverted person benefits from connection, right? We have different levels of how much we benefit and how much we need, but we all need that. And there's a lot of value in shared experiences. And who can understand better what you're dealing with day in, day out at work than the people around you, your colleagues? They get it, right? I can try to explain to my husband all day long how difficult my job can be at times. He tries to listen, but he's in finance. We're in kind of two different worlds in a lot of ways. So I spend a lot of time consulting with my peers, trying to put myself out there, get consultations, tell them what's on my mind. And it really helps me quite a bit. I can tell you at a personal level, but research shows that it helps quite a bit as well. We know sharing feelings of vulnerability and stress create some of the strongest social bonds. So how can you take this information and put it into action? One tip that we have for you all is just simply to find a friend. Find a friend at work if you can. So a staggering statistic that is actually based on very, very good research, decades long, from a meta-analysis done by a very well-known loneliness researcher, is that chronic loneliness is as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. If you are chronically lonely and socially isolated, and you don't really have many people to talk to or turn to, you don't have an adequate support system, your health is at risk physically. It's not just mental health, although the two are inextricably linked. Keep in mind that truly loneliness kills. It is very detrimental to your health. So sometimes we just have to do what's in our control to try to change a situation. There's so many benefits of finding a friend at work. Some of those are listed here. This is based on research by Gallup. But people who have a friend at work are more likely to stay. They're less likely to turn over. They're more productive, tend to have more fun, and that helps improve the environment. And I always tell people it can just start with one person. This is just some research on the importance of both social support, but also employer support during some crises that we've experienced, some health crises. So these data come out of SARS, MERS, and COVID, but strong employee, like peer support, as well as employer and supervisor support are extremely protective at work, extremely protective against psychiatric symptoms, PTSD, burnout, other problems like that. So some more practical tips for bolstering up your social health and connecting with others: schedule some time. My Outlook looks kind of wild. Like if anyone were to look at my Outlook, it has some like non-work related stuff in there that's kind of funny, like put a turkey in the oven or go pick up the dog. But it also has in there, give my friend from graduate school a phone call, call my parents, because I want to prioritize those things just like I would a meeting with a colleague or with my chair or in a doctor's appointment, right? Consider this an appointment with your health. Remembering that the quality of your relationships matters a lot more than how many followers you have or how many people you think are friends, right? The quality matters a lot more. So if you just have one or two people that you can talk to about difficult experiences at work, that makes all the difference. Another tip is just to assume people like you, right? There's plenty of research that when people assume people like them, that the other party is actually more likely to like them. Now, why might that be? So if you assume someone hates you, you might start acting a little weird the next time you see that person. No eye contact, maybe kind of going right past them. Maybe you're acting a little cold and suddenly they're like, well, what's that person's problem? I had no problem with them before. I actually like them. But we make assumptions that people don't. And there's really nothing to lose by assuming someone likes you, and in fact, a lot to gain. Focus on quality time with people. Put the phone down. No phones in the lunch that you're going to have. Be authentic, right? So part of authenticity, we need that authenticity to build trust. This is how meaningful relationships are made. So that means being honest, telling people what's going on in your mind, how you feel. You don't have to share it all in one day and one interaction. It kind of builds slowly over time. But without revealing any vulnerability, you're not going to get anywhere in these more meaningful relationships. Try something new. The brain loves novelty, right? Don't go to the same old place. Invite a coworker to lunch. I've been doing that lately. People I don't really know at all, but I've seen their name a million times. I'll shoot them off an email. Hey, I've noticed we're interested in similar things. You want to go to Tzatziki's sometime? I mean, it kind of sounds weird this day and age, but it's really led to some beautiful friendships at work. So I actually have people I regularly see now and go to lunch with just from putting it out there, right? And then another strategy is trying a walk and talk meeting. So you can kind of get some physical activity in, do something different together, get around some different scenery, but still kind of get a meeting that you need out of the way. So some final thoughts. I hope you all definitely see, maybe you knew before, but I hope some of this evidence really hones in on the fact that workplace culture and community matter, and they matter a lot. We know some of the factors that Dr. Meese discussed: sense of belonging, trust, psychological safety, and recognition are all important factors in building positive workplace culture and community. And the interpersonal effectiveness skills, give, fast, dear man that I shared with you all, can be an integral part of building a positive culture and shifting morale within your group that starts with you, right? So if we all practice these, the culture can improve. And loneliness kills, seriously. So find a friend at work and prioritize connecting with others. So that is the end of our presentation. So we wanted to leave some time for any discussion or questions.